Before we start this show, just a word from our sponsor, 20 by 20 Apparel. Founded in 2015, 20 by 20 Apparel brings original tributes to pro wrestling's classic arenas, moments, and events. They look to spotlight the bloopers, bleeps, and body slams along with the biggest, smallest, strangest, and strongest that pro wrestling has had to offer. Along with their awesome line of pro wrestling apparel, they do offer many services. In the world of wrestling, there are hundreds of shirts, promotions, flyers, social media accounts, and ads. Don't get lost in the sea of parody shirts and display fonts. They can provide professional graphic design services at a reasonable price. 20 by 20 also hand screen prints all the tees in-house. If you would like to discuss possible run of tees, posters, koozies, foam fingers, or whatever, drop them a line. Go to 20 by 20 Apparel. That's the number 20x, the number 20 apparel.com. Now, let's get to the show.
Fresh is the word.
I'm Jim Duggan, got long wood for plenty hoes. I keep it fresher than fresh, but you already know. You suckers bummy, I'm money, I got a ton of flows. My weed loud like a motherfucking thunder roll. Your shit quiet like you ballin' on a budget though. We see your kicks and we laugh and yellin' what are those. You see me shining like a suit on puffy. You know my grindin' shit is too strong, buddy. That's why the dude call money. I be stuntin' like it's nothing at all. Cause it's nothing to me, it's probably something to y'all. Trying to smoke like me, then come and fuck with your dog. Got a closet full of kicks, you can't cop it tomorrow. And I'm fresher than the freshest, you can tell it's in my essence. Bitch, you see the way I'm rapping, yes I do this shit to death. Until I'm running out of breath, or tell somebody cut a check. But either way you know it's fresh, and either way you know it's fresh. Fresh, we fresh. Fresh, fresh, goddammit, we fresh.
Welcome to the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier. This is episode number 101. In continuing with the 100th episode celebration, the guest for this episode is Techno pioneer, Detroit's own Carl Craig. As one of the producers and DJs that helped shape the evolution of electronic music both in Detroit and around the globe, Carl Craig has hit a legendary status by continuing to not only produce quality music in a variety of styles for multiple generations, but still is a staple in the global techno community. During our chat, we talked extensively about what it is to be a good DJ and how it is to be a fearless DJ, along with how you can balance your personal life with your DJ lifestyle, the history of Detroit techno, and Carl Craig's childhood. So let's get on to the interview with Carl Craig. And we were just, before we started rolling, we were talking about some of the things that he's into these days. You know, what are you working on right now?
Well, right now I have a radio show on Worldwide FM that just started 2 months ago. This is my second episode that I'm doing. And it's really interesting as we were talking that, you know, my scope as a DJ, you know, I'm looking for music that can, you know, work at festivals, 10,000 people in front of you, as well as work in, you know, larger clubs with 1,000 or 2,000 people in front of you, and also things that can work when I play small clubs that I can rock the clubs and stuff. So my view of how to pick music is a little narrow for that kind of stuff. Of course, I always try to, you know, hype up my boys, my label, you know, Detroit music, that kind of stuff. But, you know, there are some abstract Kyle Hall tracks I can't play. So this gives me an opportunity to you know, not only play things that are more difficult for me to play at a big place, you know, at a festival, but that I can, you know, dig deeper and find other things, you know, that could be interesting for the show.
Do you feel like if you had the opportunity to play like a smaller space, that you can actually get down and do some of those more abstract tracks?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how long I play. So there's some venues that I'll say, okay, you know, fuck it, I want to play 6 hours, 8 hours, whatever, and that gives me a really large possibility to do it. So, like, and it was funny in Pasha, in Ibiza, which I've been playing in random people's gigs for years, and it's always like, okay, boom, 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 that kind of thing. For Cocoon, which is really funny because they're great friends of mine, but it was really funny because they're not known for funk, and they're like, hey, play a funk set.
Right.
Okay, so from beginning to end, I played a funk set. And, I was playing Engine Number 9 and, James Brown and Parliament and, funk disco stuff and straight disco. I was playing Shalimar and playing, the Whispers and playing all these things. And when I have the opportunity, then and even in other scenarios, I'll start playing Miles Davis at the beginning, just to warm up the room to get on point with what I really want to do.
I've always seen, like, on your social media and on Twitter, you'll always talk about being a fearless DJ.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Yeah. When I was listening to radio, when Electrifying Mojo was on, what you could hear within that 4 hours of his radio show, I believe it was 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever. You can hear a little bit of everything, I mean, good Lord, you might play some Led Zeppelin in there, as well as funk, as well as Kraftwerk, as well as,
right.
The English New Romantic stuff like Visage, Peter Frampton, Elton John, he was playing all this stuff. And that's what I think that DJing, playing music is really about, is playing, great music. What, like, for instance, using the Ibiza as a template for this conversation, people have gotten to the point that they think that the Ibiza sound is this kind of 24-hour sound of, just the same kind of beat that you could take, you could take E2 or you could take Coke to, or you could do whatever, and that's your thing, and that's the beat of the island. That's what people talk about. I've gotten arguments with people over it, but the real sound of Ibiza is more like what Electrifying Mojo was doing, because they called it a Balearic sound in the 90s when Pete Tong and Paul Oakenfold came over, and they heard DJs playing a mixture of they would play, Spanish music, they would play disco, they would play early house, they would play funk, they would play rock, they would play, a guy who rents his place out to us sometimes, he came to Ibiza because of Pasha, and at that time they were playing Pink Floyd, and they were playing, all different types of music, and that's really the real Ibiza sound. And for me, the real Detroit sound is like what Electrifying Mojo was doing. Or when you heard Jeff Mills playing as the Wizard, he'd play Fat Boys, he'd play Egyptian Lover, he'd play all Play at Your Own Risk, he'd play Junie Morrison, he'd play all kinds of stuff. So that was, to me, you're playing party music, but you didn't have to adhere to this kind of thing where you're playing in many cases, music that doesn't mean anything as a bridge to play your big hits, and a lot of guys, they just try to play, like with EDM, they just try to play the hits from beginning to end, and it's really not a stretch to do that. It's a stretch to play a track that will potentially clear the floor and then come back with something else, There was a documentary about house music and how house music sound came about. DJ Pierre was talking about Ron Hardy when he played acid tracks for the first time, and he played acid tracks early to see how it would work.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like people were standing there; they didn't know what to expect. But of course, there weren't any people there at the time too when you play early. There were just a few people there. Played it early. There were a few people that might have been into it. A bunch of people standing around didn't know. He said by the fourth time, the place went nuts. People were going crazy, and that's what you need. You don't need to play somebody else's playlist. You find your own thing, and then you might have 2 hours to play. You play it, and it might not work, and then you just wait and you play it again. and then people will be like, okay, I know that sound, you know, and then you just kind of
Right.
keep pounding it in.
Whether you're playing to a festival 10,000 people or you're just a DJ at a sports bar,
Mhm.
is it still possible to be fearless?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you have to take the risk of not getting hired again. That's what it comes down to. You know, you have to risk it because, of course, you're at a bar playing a sports bar, and people, you know, they probably want to hear like Soft Cell all night long, you know, or hear whatever they hear on the radio, Migos and
Right.
and Future and all that kind of stuff. But you know, your job is to influence them in some way. We use the word educate,
Yeah.
but most people are dumb and they don't want to learn anything. So you have to you have to say something else in that way that people will say, oh yeah, you know, it's exposure, you know, or I'm giving you a gift. This is a gift for you. You know, hey, this music is a gift. This is something special. Get on the mic. Yeah, this is something special. Y'all ain't heard this before. Hopefully you love it.
Right.
You know, or I know you're gonna love it. Not even hopefully. It's like positive affirmation. I know you're gonna love this.
What about this notion? It just seems like a lot of DJs will play almost the same songs from popular artists.
Yeah.
Like it'll be like the same 4 Prince tracks, same 4 Michael Jackson tracks. You know, when there's so many, and we're not talking about one-hit wonders. We're talking about a lot of artists who have more than one good song. You know, why can't DJs play more songs from these artists? Even if they play those songs they always play, why can't they just like maybe the next song play like a deep Prince song? You know, why do you think people don't do that?
Because they're scared, more than likely. You know, some people don't have a scope past the concept of popular music, and you get people who become DJs for various reasons, and same as being a rock guitarist. You know, you usually become one in order to get girls. That's usually what it is. So you know, you play whatever is going to make the girls dance,
Right.
and that's the most important aspect for those, or the most important idea. But so you don't really take risks so much because of that, you know. Because you think that it's not going to be accepted, the girls, or that people might throw something at you, or that they don't, you know. And I think that's part of being a DJ, is getting shit thrown at you sometimes, you know, that because it happens to everybody, you know, whether you're big or whether you're not big or whatever, that you'd get some dickweed that's in the audience that just,
Right.
you know, whether they're trying to get your attention. So they throw something at you, because Jeff Mills, I mean, somebody threw glasses at him, you know, at a gig. It's online, and that's horrible. You know, this genius is getting stuff thrown at him. And, you know, he does what exactly you're supposed to do, is you just stop the music and you walk away. You know,
Fuck
it's
this,
like,
man. I'm leaving.
yeah, you want a party? Okay, I'll give you a party, but, you know, you got to be cool. And so, you know, if you put on Ballad of Dorothy Parker from Prince, it's a fucking great song. But it's something for people that you have to kind of think, because the rhythm isn't just a normal rhythm. You know, guys that are risky DJs, that are incredible DJs, like Kenny Dixon, he'll play it.
Yeah.
You know, no problem. You know, but you get people who aren't risky, they're not going to touch anything that goes into that realm. So, you know, there's a record that I love to play before I do a live set. And it gets me so amped up. It's called 17 Days from Prince. You remember this one?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, 17 days till the rain comes down. And I get so amped before I get on. And then, you know, I love that feeling of having that. But you won't get a DJ that'll play that as a Prince classic. You know, a risky guy will play it. A guy who knows will play it. But, you know, a normal guy, he'll put on, you know, your typical Little Red Corvette, or, you know, whatever.
Erotic City.
Erotic City. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Erotic City. I mean, that used to be my favorite song as a kid. I'm sick of that song, you know,
Me
because it's
too.
that's just the go-to house, you know, hybrid Prince track, you know. So
Right. No, there's so many tracks. I'm just like, I could care less if I ever hear any of these songs again. And this spans from, you know, from R&B to hip hop, and just like, okay, if you want to play that one song, cool, but maybe right after it, you play something else, and people might put two and two together and be like, oh, what's that? That's the same people that are on that song that I really like. Maybe I was missing out on that, and we can. What is that? But I don't know. Do you feel like crowds are more open minded these days, or does it depend on the DJ and the sort of niche that they're in?
Oh, it's unfortunate because electronic music is becoming so commercialized now, especially with the biggest festivals and what they're doing. Everybody's Instagram has to have everyone's hands in the air. It's like a friend of mine in Holland. He posted photos of the after. Everybody sitting outside of the club after the club is closed. And it's like, yeah, that's what I want to see more of because that's the real part. That's really what the real deal is. It's that after thing. Those people just kind of sitting there. And so, we're normalized to think that a great party is those points where everybody's hands in the air, but that might be only one song on a person's 2-hour session,
Right.
Where everybody's hands are. And I've seen that before. And I've been in those situations before where it's like, yeah, the set's going good, but not everybody's got their hands up. Not everybody's cheering and like it's a football game or whatever. And there's only certain DJs that are really good at making it happen. Like Luciano is excellent at bringing people from point A to point B, and they're just going nuts for it. They're just thinking that it's like that they're at a FC Barcelona or whatever match. So, but yeah, I might have lost your question there though.
We're just talking about if people are open minded, if crowds are open minded, or
Yeah.
it just like depends on the niche that they're in.
Yeah, and that was kind of my point, is that people think that that's what they're supposed to do at parties. So or festivals, and it becomes where it's maybe a bit more closed-minded, for folks. What's the guy who was doing Tomorrowland and he's doing the aerobics and all that kind of stuff? Did you see that
Oh,
video?
I saw that. I don't know. I don't know his name, but that shit was crazy.
Yeah, it was quite insane, and it's interesting that somebody put him on, because it was maybe like watching an interactive art exposition or something, performance.
Right.
But the music that he's playing is totally like horrible. And I wouldn't doubt that the majority of the set people were like leaving,
Yeah.
which is interesting. But because of what he was doing, DJs hated it. But as an artist, if that was the intent, was for it to be an art exposition, then yeah, I think it was great, and I think people are closed-minded because of that. But yeah, festivals make it possible for people to be very closed-minded, because they expect something that's going to be a festival performance, unless you're doing a live. And when you're doing a live as a band, then you can play ballads.
Yeah.
Then you can slow it down a bit. Then you can speed it up again. But for DJs, it's very close-minded, because you got to keep it at a pace that is, from your starting point to your end point, it's got to increase. So it's starting at 130, and you're going to end at 190. People will be like, yeah, I'm about to get off. Yeah. Play whatever that Moby track was, 300 BPM.
Right.
Boom, and it's like, yeah. Yeah.
Do you think it's the ultimately the DJ's job to get the crowd engaged, and is there just times when it isn't gonna happen?
Yeah. It is important. The DJ in some case musically is like an MC, getting on and getting people interested in going. And the DJ at the beginning, and I say this for festivals or parties or even nightclubs, the DJ at the beginning is the most important guy of the whole night or the whole thing, because he sets the mood. So if you're in a club and the guy is banging before anybody's walked in the door,
Right.
and they're at, he's at 140 and people are just kind of walking in the door, he could blow it for the next round of DJs, because the next guys might be, house DJs, and they can't, the mentality hasn't changed. They have to play something in order to clear the palette of the room. You might even have to just come on and just play ambient music for 15 minutes to get people to just kind of settle down.
Yeah.
And then you could start playing your thing and ramp up the thing. So the DJ that starts the night is so important, because he gets people in that frame of mind, ready for Lil Louis Vega, or ready for Todd Terry, or ready for Ricardo Villalobos, or ready for Fatboy Slim, or whatever.
Yeah, I've seen. There's been times, especially around here, where you might take an earlier slot or the mid slot. How do you like doing those earlier slots tonight?
Yeah, it's my favorite, because like I said, it makes it where I can actually open people's minds more, because I can play stuff that I couldn't play at a peak time.
Right.
I could play the funk set, I could play jazz, I could play these things, and it doesn't bother me if people are just kind of mulling around and are getting drinks or whatever, because it's fun to me and it feels good. And at least if they're sticking around, they're hearing it.
Yeah.
I've said it in the past when Avicii was alive. I'd say, that would be the perfect opener for anybody, because nobody's gonna leave. You could play whatever the hell you want to. You could play anything, and they're just gonna stick around. They might not like it, but they will hear it. They will get that chance to hear it. And with radio, we don't have that anymore, where you have somebody like Electrifying Mojo, Dave Dixon, I think his name was, on WABX, or guys that were playing alternative stuff. They were playing, and you had the opportunity to go back and then switch stations and go back and forth and hear things, where when you're on internet radio, most of the time you're like, okay, I want to hear techno, and then bloom, it's just techno. Or satellite radio, it's like, okay, I go to the hip hop station, it's only hip hop, it ain't nothing else. You go to Diplo, it's only electronic, nothing else. And you just get into this range that is like a tunnel vision, musical tunnel vision.
Do you ever feel like, and maybe this is more so for smaller gigs, that it's almost like you turn into like background music for just everybody's there, and you don't know if there's actually a vibe there to actually be a part of the music? Maybe people are just it's like almost like a meetup to figure out how they're going to get fucked up later on.
Right, sure. Yeah, you get that, definitely. Like when you play at small places that are bars, usually the owners will get mad if you're not playing stuff that's going to make people buy drinks.
Right.
If you play stuff that make them leave, then you're not doing the job that you're supposed to. In Spain, it's normal for people to do kind of like a tailgate thing. So they come to the party, they sit outside, they get totally drunk and screwed up outside, and then they come into the party, and then they do it to save money, or they do it however they do it. There was a festival that was playing with Richie Houghton, and this is when he was doing his Minus parties, and we had the other room. I came into his room, and I can't remember who was playing, Magda or something, and people were just standing around the whole time, but they were jam-packed like sardines, standing around waiting for Rich to come on. And it was quite incredible to see that.
Do you ever get bored as a DJ, and what do you do to sort of get out of that funk?
That's a very tricky question, because everybody gets bored at their jobs.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen your tweets.
Dude, definitely.
So everybody gets bored at their jobs. When playing a gig, and I'm not my own cheerleader. I'm not the kind of DJ that sits around and tries to get the audience going that kind of way. It feels like somebody's dad being at the gig, like, come on kids, let's dance. I don't like that. I like
Young kids, how you doing?
yeah, and you never saw Miles Davis doing any of that stuff when he was alive. So no, I don't.
Yeah, some people are better at it than others.
Some people
So,
are, yeah,
Some people just it just isn't their style to
yeah,
be up there. You don't see John Digweed up there on the mic, but
Right.
he's just up there cool and composed and gets through his stuff like a champ. And
But I'll get on the mic. I don't have a problem with getting on the mic and
Right.
talking a little shit. That's no problem. So sometimes that loosens up things and gets rid of the monotony a bit. I used to drink a lot of tequila. That would always keep me interested. Yeah, that would always keep me a little interested. But I don't need to do that all the time. That's not necessarily how you stay on the planet and maximize your time on the planet by, getting drunk every night. Because if I got 4 gigs a week, 5 gigs a week, and I'm drinking, half a bottle of Patron every night.
You're always traveling, man. So
Yeah.
I don't think the tequila would work well with you.
Oh, it works a little too well sometimes, But it's even better when you don't drink for a while and then you start drinking again. Then it's like, okay, this is kind of fun. But yeah, it's a good thing to take everything with some type of care. And I don't do any drugs, so that's a good thing. So I don't have to worry about that.
But just the whole idea of DJing, do you ever get bored with it? If so, how do you recharge your batteries?
I try to listen to all different types of music, so it doesn't get so monotonous, because when you're listening to house music and techno music and or if you listen to hip hop all day or whatever, it can get really, really monotonous.
You're doing all your gigs and hearing all the other DJs that are on your gigs.
Yeah.
You'd be like, I don't want to hear any of this music.
Yeah.
After a while.
Mike Banks said something that was real funny. He said that sometimes you hear music that makes your ear hair grow to protect itself, to protect your ears, your ear hair grow in order to get away from it. And yeah, there's a lot of people that play a lot of bad music, but sometimes that bad music does help the monotony as well. It's like, oh man, that's so bad, but yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting what's going on. Sometimes I think the boredom probably comes from everything that it takes to get there. So, flying, waiting at the airport for hours, waiting for connection flights, different car, different taxi. Sometimes, like in Italy, like the last time I played in Italy, I got picked up in Nice in France to drive to Italy to play the gigs, and I had to go back. So it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours. Some gigs in Croatia might take 3 hours to get to the gig in a van where it's just it's not a luxury van either. It's like a cargo van with a bench seats in them. You're just like, God damn,
I think it was Alice Cooper. Don't quote me on it, but I think it was Alice Cooper that said, "I don't get paid for the 1 hour that I'm on stage. It's the 23 hours around it that I'm traveling."
The travel.
3 hours it gets me there.
That's right. Yeah. Because Sven Väth says pretty much the same thing. You don't pay me to play. I do that for free. You pay me to get there.
What sort of advice would you have for any upcoming DJs, producers, any sort of musician, if they are sort of getting into those they are getting bored, to sort of reinvent themselves?
And that's the name of the game too, is that you have to reinvent yourself. Some people, like Jeff Mills, is just Jeff Mills. It's just he's always been an amazing DJ since I met him in 1984. Is just like always amazing. But other people, you have to find things that make it interesting to the people, and you have to make it interesting to yourself first. So if you're in a creative rut, and it's the same if you're a visual artist or you're a journalist or a novelist or anything, you have to find that thing that's inspirational, and sometimes your imagination just stops working. There's just no more imagination left, you know. So like for a new cat, I would always recommend um, to listen to different music and um, edit stuff. Sit there and it might not be your track. Do some re-edits. You know, um, sample some things. Just take some Doris Day tracks and sample them. And just mess around and try to make your own edits and stuff. Because when I'm not being um, originally creative for my own music, then that's what I'm doing. I'm editing. I get stuff that I like and I re-edit it, and that's a lot of my set is re-editing other people's stuff and playing it. If I think it's hot, but I think something doesn't lay right, then I'll re-edit it into what'll work for my set.
When you talk about being fearless, what can people do to sort of get over those fears when reinventing themselves?
Mm, Again, you got to get that imagination running, because that's the only way that you can kind of hype yourself up, you know. Yeah, when you start losing that imagination, you got to find something in order to jumpstart it. Even reading, I mean, I used to read a lot more than I do now, but I'll go back to something like Fight Club and read that, you know, because it's one thing watching the movie, is another thing reading, what the fuck is going on, because the imagination is not right in front of you, like when you're watching a movie. You have the cinematography, you have all that stuff. When you're reading, even if you saw the movie, you're still kind of remixing it in your mind. Yeah. And I think that's super important.
When it comes to the history of both Detroit techno and electronic music globally, we always kind of hear the same stories being told. And it's great that throughout the generations, we've been able to pass down this information from one generation of artists to the next, new generations of fans. But we always hear the same, stories about the Belleville Three, the same about maybe DJ Godfather. There's those same stories that get told, over and over again. Do you think there's any way that the story of Detroit electronic music, or just Detroit techno, or just techno as a whole, can be sort of freshened up for these new generations of electronic music fans?
Mm. Um, there's not a lot that's talked about the clubs before techno started. So, um, La Umos is one of them. There's some discussion when you talk about King Collier, which I think is important. But um, when a number of names did Charivari and the kind of music that was happening at that time, and the kind of people that were going to the parties, you never hear about Rock and Talk. I don't know if you remember Rock and Talk. It was in Windsor. No. And they were playing a lot of early techno stuff. That's where I would go in high school and heard Goodbye Kiss and Grooving Without a Doubt and Suburban Nights first EP and all that kind of stuff. So there are things that get left out. But what you don't hear a lot about, and what was amazing about rap, and what we hear that makes it really interesting, and what you hear about rock too, is there was a lot of debauchery, there was a lot of gangsterism, there was a lot of all kinds of stuff, where techno is pretty clean in comparison to that stuff. We don't know anything about all the underworld stuff that was going on around the time that techno was happening. We don't hear a hell of a lot about the like when I met Jeff, I had gone to see. I was working with my cousin doing lights, and I had gone to whatever the club was that he was playing over on 8 Mile and Myers. Um, but I used to go also to these college parties that were done at U of M or Michigan State University or some other places, and seeing Direct Drive play, and these guys that were like serious scratch DJs at the time, that were big DJs. So you don't hear about, and that's still clean. It's still really clean, you know. But I would love to know about more of the debauchery, and I've been involved in some of, been around at the girls, and seeing how the boys deal in that way. But it's never been so, we never had that thing where it was so decadent, that you just like eating everything and everybody involved, and pulling guns out on people, and holding people over balconies by their ankles, everything, every all that stuff that we know about rap and rock and roll, and it never happened, or don't know of anything that's happened like that in techno.
And I'm glad you kind of brought that up because, when you go back to the late 70s, going into the early 80s, you had all these sort of subcultures that were kind of sprouting up. You had hip hop, you had punk, you had hardcore, and then you had electronic music. Why do you feel like these subcultures all sort of sprung up all at the same time?
Um, Entertainment was a lot less. Um, in the 50s, when rock and roll was happening, there was the advent of popular television, which was important. In the 60s, there was civil rights movement, Vietnam, all that kind of stuff. And in the 70s, you know, there were still issues, earlier part of the 70s with Vietnam and people fighting about that. Um, but I think a lot of it had to do with entertaining yourself, and being able to have the opportunity to entertain yourself. So, punk might have been um, a direct descendant of not liking disco. So kind of bringing rock and roll back, and the fight about that. The kind of riotous thing that you would have, that would maybe in the late 60s, early 70s, be involved in riots, be involved in these things that made it possible for those music, the attitude, because there's still people with the attitude of it that wanted to express themselves. So through the music they express themselves. Same way like with house, how house music came from the disco's dead aspect, the Soldier Field, or what was it in Chicago where they blew out, where they blew the vinyl out of the disco records out of a cannon. So of course it opened it up for house music to go underground, redevelop into something new, and then pop out 5 years, 6 years later.
I feel like when it comes to like the history of Detroit techno, a lot of the guys that we talk about, whether it's Juan or Derek or Kevin or Jeff, they all kind of have that sort of in a nutshell, maybe one or two line thing that we can talk about them about. It's like their little story in a nutshell. But when it comes to you, when it comes to the Carl Craig story, I feel like there's still this sort of open, vast enigma. You're like an enigma. There's like a mystery behind it. How are you able to, go so long and not sort of have that in a nutshell story about your life and career?
Well, you have to keep people guessing, because when they can't guess anymore, then you can become quite boring. So it's like a marriage. People think that in your marriage you're supposed to just be settled, and that's in daily mundane routine. But you have to keep that other person interested in you. And if you're saying the same shit every time at dinner. Oh yeah, how was your day? Oh yeah, it was fine. I hate my boss. You know, oh yeah, oh yeah, something interesting happened. A UPS guy tripped over a crack and blah blah blah, blah, that kind of stuff. Then it's like, oh yeah, you're getting fat together and you're getting bored together, and it's just silly, and that's not what I want in my life, and that's what I don't want as a career. So that's why, I grew up listening to jazz music, so jazz became interesting to me. I grew up listening to classical music, so classical music was interesting to me. Here's what I do. House music and techno music has always been interesting. Rock music has always been interesting to me. So I never liked the concept of being locked in and typecast to one thing, because it's just boring to be that way. So by me working with Marcus and Wendell and doing a Tribe thing and Detroit Experiment and doing Interzone Orchestra and doing the Versus project and working with Francesco Tristano and working with doing the synthesizer ensemble. There's always a story that's interesting to me. So I hope that is damn well interesting to the rest of y'all that's out there.
Who was the first person in your life that was sort of influential to you in regards to music or making music?
I have an older brother and an older sister, so definitely they were the first. Um, my brother is probably inadvertently the guy that got me to experiment with music, because he had a guitar and he didn't want a guitar anymore, but my parents didn't give him the money to buy a bass, so he took two strings off and it became a bass, that kind of thing. So he had a big impact on me. My sister listened to other music. So she was listening to Gil Scott Heron when my brother was listening to Black Sabbath and P-Funk, and then we all agreed on Prince, So those early days of them fighting for the radio, whether my brother wanted to listen to WCHB and my sister wanted to listen to KCLW, that kind of thing. But later on, my cousin, who I was working with doing lights for, he had actually made a record before I started helping him with lights. Was it before or after? I can't remember. But he made Technicolor with Juan. And that was a big deal for me, because that's the first time that I touched the synthesizer. He had some synths at home. And I think I might have saw 808 for the first time at his place, and excuse me, and that was like really a huge impact on me, like huge.
When was the first time you had that sort of holy shit moment where you just thought like, hey, this music thing could be something that I could do for a long time?
Failure was never an option. That's what it is that failure was never an option. Because if I failed, I had to work at the post office, or I had to, and that wasn't something that I wanted to do. Of course, if I had to get a job, the post office is the way to do it. But I mean, my parents were really. It was important for me to please my parents for a lot of stuff, but my parents were regular Joes, so getting a job was the ultimate goal for anybody in their idea. Anything that was outside of, and that's the way it is in Detroit anyway. Yes. That you tell somebody that you're doing something creative and they're like, oh yeah, nice hobby, when you're gonna get a real job.
Oh, you still doing that rap stuff?
Exactly. It's just, you tell somebody that you're into music, oh yeah, you sing. It's like, no, I don't sing. I play synthesizers. Oh yeah. Well, what you want to do? You want to be like the next Barry Gordy? And it's again, these mundane people that they come home and it's like, oh yeah, where's my dinner? Yeah, what'd you do at work today? I ate a ham and cheese sandwich. that kind of thing. So it was never an option for me for this to be a failed adventure.
With having that mind state of saying failure wasn't an option, how did you deal with failure?
I'm a person who deals on hope, and ex-girlfriend of mine, her father was a mentor to me, and I would always say about hope, 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 hope. And he's like, "Nah, hold on a minute, yeah, you can hope all you want, but you gotta make shit happen. This is what you gotta do." So that was part of a motivation for me. But I still dealt with a lot of hope because when you, especially when you switch up doing music, doing types of music, well, you hope that you're gonna be able to do something really good, you know. And the only way that you can definitely do something really good is if you follow the formulaic templates of making a pop record. And I didn't know those templates, and I would never fall into that because it doesn't interest me. So it's still always hope, and with that hope, it's experimentation. So the people who die in science experiments and stuff, they're like, "Oh God, I hope this works." If I mix these two things together, I hope the whole room doesn't explode.
Right. I hope it doesn't fill up with gas and I'm in here choking.
Right. So I dealt with a lot of hope, but there is some laser focus that you have to have in it too, and he was, thanks Mr. Green, he was one of the guys that was like, yeah, undo that hope.
When you're living with that sort of idea of hope, especially in a really tough city like Detroit, what did the city of Detroit bring to your character?
Well, I hope that I got home safely. That was, ooh, yeah, that was a lot of it because I mean, having beef with kids in high school in Detroit is a lot different than having beef with kids, and well, it's getting closer to it now. Unfortunately, the mass shootings that happen in schools, but we were scared of that shit back in 1987, 86, 85. That somebody will catch you on the way out and take you out. It wasn't about getting abducted. It was about being caught at the bus stop, not paying attention. You know, so Detroit, and I'd gone. I I don't. I say this now. I don't even know what high school I graduated from. To tell you the truth, I know I graduated, but I'm not sure if I graduated from Cooley or if I graduated from Mumford. I'm not sure which one I graduated from, but Mumford was the last one I went to, so I guess that's where I graduated from. So this is like, I think that's really more Detroit than anybody can say. Me and DJ Stingray are the two guys that are like, have no idea where we graduated from. I think it was Mumford. I went to Cooley the longest, so I got kicked out of Cass, so I definitely didn't graduate from there.
What was Carl Craig like as a kid? Who was that person?
I was always in love. Seriously, like, I mean, you just had to be a cute girl with, long hair. Man, I was in love. From the time that I can remembering, I was in love all the time. That was Carl Craig until I got married, and then I realized that things were a little different after you get married. But yeah, yeah. That was me, and always smiling. Not like now where I'm just kind of gruesome in some situations. Silly and always into music. I carried records everywhere that I went. Cassettes, records, whatever. Yeah.
What was the first album you ever bought?
The first that I remember buying was Ohio Players' Honey. Yeah. And my dad took me for my birthday to get a record, and that's the one that I picked. And he got hell for it, and I got hell for it because there's a woman pouring honey on her body.
Of course you would have picked that record.
And what was it, 1976 or something? So I was 7 years old, 7 or 8 years old.
Speak about being in love.
Yeah, right. I mean, Yeah. And I knew those Ohio Players records before, like Rattlesnake, because like I said, my brother's older than I am. So it was always a bald headed chick on the front. And this one, she was wearing a wig or something, or it was a different one that had hair. And yeah, I was seriously in love. That was the first one I remember. And my mom, and I've said this before, I got to give her credit for it, because she took the album cover and she took newspaper and she made a permanent sleeve out of newspaper over the cover of the record. She slipped the record back in. She said, "I dare you to take this paper off. I dare you to take it off." And I didn't take it off, but again, to give her credit, what was important about this is that she let me keep the record.
Oh, of course, yeah.
She just didn't take the record and break it and throw it away. She let me keep the record, and she didn't know what was on the record because Sweet Sexy Thing. I mean, good Lord, or Sweet Sticky Thing, or whatever the name of the song was, which is the best song on the album. But still, what they're basically talking about is sex. Right. So I'm listening to these sex records still with a paper sleeve over the cover. Yeah. Another record that was an early one for me that was a big deal was Cameo, Alligator Woman. Okay. I don't know if you know this one.
No, I don't.
And I was in love with the girl on the cover. Oh my God. I was so in love with the girl on the cover. She had like probably some eyeliner or something that they drew like scales on her face and stuff. Yeah. It's beautiful, beautiful girl. And I would have these wet dreams or whatever about the girl on the cover. And the next girl that I was so in love with that I really wanted to marry was Vanity. And oh my God, I was going nuts over Vanity for years. And I think it wasn't until after she died that I found out that she was the Alligator Woman. She was the one on the cover of the Cameo record. And it blew my mind. Like, damn, what? But yeah,
When you go back and listen to those records that you listened to as a kid, like now, what sort of thoughts and feelings do you have about listening to those records?
I love every single thing that I listen to. I had these feelings that would come from hearing the sound of the records, and I think that's why I'm a producer, because when I heard "That's the Time We Feel Like Making Love to You," Roberta Flack. It's a love song, but when I heard it, my neighbor had gotten into a car accident, and the doors open, and the song is blaring out, and it was not a love song to me when I heard it. It was like a horror song. Oh, okay. The sound of it, the way the road sounded, how dark the song sounded. It didn't sound seductive and sultry to me. It sounded like, like something bad had happened. And it always stuck with me that way, or when I heard Papa was a Rolling Stone, and I would just look at that Gordy label going around in circles, and it's like, being mesmerized by the sound and by, the what they were saying and everything. It was quite impactful, and it still is for me, where I remember most of the music that I grew up with, and I like being able to reference that stuff,
Yeah, like when I was growing up, the first, album I was listening to was Jimi Hendrix, Axis Bold as Love, and Are You Experienced, along with The Who and Def Leppard. Def Leppard was my favorite band, still my favorite band of all time. And it's kind of like crazy. You're like listening to those songs when you're a kid, and they give you a certain feeling. But then you listen to them now, and you still have that sort of warm feeling about from your childhood. But then they might have these like different sort of feelings, or you know the meaning more of those songs. There's one there's one Jimi Hendrix song. It was Love or Confusion, and the way they recorded it in different, the instruments in different sides, and the vocals in different sides. So one day I was listening to it on the boombox, and for some reason had the side moved over to right or left or whatever. So you just heard like the instruments, but you heard Jimmy's voice like in the background almost, and it was like super haunting. It was kind of, whoa, this is kind of scary and freaky, but it was like super cool. Like that's something that I really kind of think about, still to this day about that song, and it's something from my childhood. Scary to me.
Mm-hmm.
It has a
Mm-hmm.
haunting feeling.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and the reason why they did recordings like that was because stereo was new and nobody knew how to really deal with stereo. So they would put the rhythm section on one side and the vocals on the other side, or piano and the vocals on the other side. So like with Supreme records, you find a lot of that. They're real difficult to listen to in a car when they're in stereo, old style stereo, and it makes it great for sampling because you can find ways of sampling something without the voice, or you just have a little bit of something in there. But yeah, it can, just hearing the room of the mic, or whether they're using spring reverb or hall reverb, or like the Motown one that was up in the attic, it can be very chilling.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Going back to your life as a touring DJ, how do you sort of keep your both physical health and mental health in check while doing all this touring?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, I try to keep my stress level very low. Um, I don't get upset if a a perfect example of um, how you can be cool when you travel, and I learned things from problems. So I broke my foot playing basketball, slipping on being drunk while playing basketball, but slipping on some sand because it was near the beach, right? And I broke my foot, and I went and this is the second time I broke my foot, and second time I was on tour that I finished the tour before I actually got it fixed. And um, when you break your foot, you learn a lot about being patient, because when you're on a plane, you can't be the first one off the plane with a broken foot when you're on crutches. So I learned to chill and not wait until to be the last one off the plane, because why do I have to be the first one off the plane? Especially if I got luggage. There's no reason to get off the plane first, because all you're going to do is stand there waiting for your damn luggage, you know? So you just chill. You just take it easy. Luggage is another thing that you learn how to be patient. So when your luggage is on the carousel, you don't have to be, when you see your luggage, you don't have to run after your luggage, because it's on a freaking circle. It's on a carousel. It's always going to come back to you. So you can just stand there and just wait until it comes back, or you can walk towards the direction that is coming as it comes around and pick it up and walk out the door. So, all this stress level stuff is just not necessary, especially when you're on tour. It's just not necessary to do, because you're gonna make the gig. If you don't make the gig, then you just reschedule. There's a lot of things that happen, drama that happens that doesn't need to happen. You don't need to be dramatic about whether shit ain't right. Either you play the gig with the wrong shit, or you just say I'm not playing the gig. Because the CDJs aren't working right, or the turntable's all fucked up, it's humming. And you just, okay, well, I'm not gonna play it. What are you gonna do? Oh, well, if the mob comes out, then okay, you got a different story. But most of the time, your contract says that if the shit ain't right, you don't play.
Right.
So that's just, so I just take it easy. On the road, I try to eat reasonable.
Yeah.
I like fast food, but one time I got really too far into eating chicken wings. I was just eating chicken wings all the time, and eating chicken wings is it's fun, and sometimes it could be great for your soul for what you're doing musically and stuff. It's like, yeah, I feel satisfied. I'm gonna play really good, but it catches up on you because it's got so much salt or so much fat and all these things. So you got to really, really think about balancing it out. But if you're eating like asparagus all the time, then it just gets boring. I have friends who travel a lot. They're vegans, and their goal of finding food is a lot more difficult. So that might make it interesting for them because they're always on an adventure to find food that they can actually eat. You know, so you find these little things that keep your interest, that help you keep your health up like a regular human being does, and you make sure that you have good people around you. So when you have good people around you that make your life easy, then it's great. But if you got a wife that's acting crazy, hey, no. See, you got somebody that comes in and checks on you, then it makes your life easy.
Right, it was right on point.
Right on point.
Right on time.
But if you have a wife that's acting crazy, then yeah, you're gonna be stressed out, and everything's gonna be screwed up.
In regards to sort of mental health in the electronic music community, and like a prime example being the recent death of Avicii, he drank his health away where he couldn't even tour anymore by age 26, and then he ends up committing suicide by 28. Do you feel like there needs to be more discussion about mental health in the electronic music community, especially when it seems like there's a lot of big expectations put on so many of these artists?
Um, there can be, but people are just gonna do what they're gonna do. So um, Avicii and the culture they grew up with in Sweden, I believe he's from. For drinking may be a way different than how it is here. So, like, I like red wine. I have a doctor um, who I went for a checkup. He asked me, "Do I drink?" I'm like, "Yeah, I drink." "How much do you drink?" "Oh, yeah, half a bottle of red wine, maybe a day or every 2 days or something like that." And he says, "Oh, well, by American standards, you're an alcoholic, but by European standards, it's normal, right?" so so you have that discussion, and in order to appease the American standards, don't drink so much. Why do you drink so much? "Well, I drink because it helps me to sleep." Okay, by American standards, don't drink so much. Take Ambien. It puts you on another course of being fucked up over something else. So which one is it? Do you drink and screw up your liver, or do you take the drugs and you get in a car accident because you slept walked, you slept drove, or you did all this other stuff, or the Ambien, the Xanax to whatever, to you go to the dentist and they prescribe you painkillers that are opiates, and then you get addicted to those things and blah blah blah. So who knows that in his culture, they might be heavy drinkers, in his family, it might be heavy drinkers, in the UK, people are drinking all the time. They're always at the pub. That's the center of culture, is going to the pub. So you never really kind of know what's happening. The discussion, I think, needs to be done in school, and when I was growing up, it was, right before the Say No to Drugs thing campaign that was going on, and you had that, so that kind of resonated with me. You had documentaries that were being shown on TV all the time about uses of PCP and LSD and the things that affected you, or even those Lockheed videos that it's like, why did Lockheed make videos about drug use? But we had these things growing up, and some people, adhered to it. Like me, I was like, okay, well, I saw Scarface and it freaked me out, so I never wanted to do cocaine, But other people saw Scarface, and then that's how modern rap music became, was by seeing Scarface and everybody wanting to be Scarface and stuff. So, it comes to your early exposure, your early education to how to deal with things. And if in your household you have heavy drinkers and heavy drug users, then more than likely you're going to be a heavy drinker or a heavy drug users. If your father is saying, "Oh yeah, boy, it's okay to do this. Yeah, go on and do it," then yeah, you're going to do it. We don't know what Avicii's household was like. We don't know some of these other people that are coming out that are bipolar or that have mental instabilities and stuff, what's in their genes. We don't know. There are people that are just going to fall victim to it, and that's what's going to happen.
Sometimes you just got to let people know that it's okay to not be okay.
Mm.
I guess.
And that was part of being weird.
Yeah.
That was part of being weird. It's like, oh yeah, that guy's being weird. It's just like, oh, you're a freaking weirdo. And then you realize later on that he had some type of psychological issues or whatever. But and some of that weirdness, Basquiat turned into his art and turned into what he was doing that made what he did great. But he was a very, unpredictable, mentally unpredictable person. And I wouldn't doubt that Avicii had other problems that brought. I don't. Some people just couldn't be saved. Whitney Houston was one that when she died, it was like, oh man, I could have saved her. But no, I don't think I could have saved her because she had shit that was going on way before she was Whitney Houston, the singer.
Right.
Do
you ever feel like some of these artists who die at a younger age, are maybe even just too big for this world? Like their impact, their creativity is just too big for this world, and they sort of just, burn out quickly.
Mm,
Do you believe in any of that stuff like that?
I I don't actually. I believe that there are very special people in this world that see the cracks that are in our reality.
Yeah.
So they look at air and can see air. They can see shit. Like what's his name? Stephen Hawking's.
Yeah.
I think he's one of those guys, or Albert Einstein or whatever. These guys that see things that we don't see. And that's how they could perceive. Um, do their jobs. They're people that know how to pick out hit records every freaking time. Clive Davis, I think, is another guy that's just like, that just Quincy Jones, that just the perspective of stuff is so different. That's how they can be so successful about what they do. Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, those kind of people. And in order for you to get on that stage, in order for Whitney Houston to get on that stage, her ego had to be so out of whack in order to get up there to perform in front of everybody. And if her ego wasn't out of whack, she was probably making her ego go out of whack with drugs. She was doing whatever it took in order for her to be able to sing in front of people and be able to enjoy it herself. Avicii, Prince, any Beyonce, it's like you've got to have things that make you cope to be able to be as great as what you are, because you have this talent and you have so many people. Michael Jackson has said, when he was young, you had, grown ass men. He was 15 years old, and grown ass men were trying to borrow money off of him, and it's just crazy, it's just nuts. So, they're regular motherfuckers, but there's something that just makes them special beyond their talent to get to the point of where they've been able to get to. And I really, really believe, I think Kanye might also be one of those guys that sees, he sees air. You don't have, doesn't have to be smoke in the room. He just sees the air. He sees the particles, John Coltrane. People have I forgot what it's called, where you can see color in music.
Yeah, I forget what that is.
Yeah, whatever it's called. But Coltrane was supposedly one that could see color. When music's happening, he sees colors, and that's kind of supports my point in some way, because I don't have it. I don't see it.
But you're still Very highly creative.
I do my thing. You know.
As we wind down this interview, if you had to sort of extract some sort of lesson out of your life and career that somebody listening to this, no matter what they do, could sort of transition into their own life or career, what would that lesson be?
Right.
What would that be?
I think the key to longevity is to have a certain to be humble in some way. I think that's the key to sticking around. That you're just not that dickweed that walks into the room and you got to give me all the attention because I'm famous or I'm special or that kind of thing. Most of the time, people who have those big egos, they can get big real fast and then they fall off and then they have a lot of problems for a long time until they get rediscovered again. You know, and by staying humble, I think you can be able to have more um, longevity in what you do, but also to have more peace with yourself. So Dennis Coffey's one guy that's a good example where he did all that great music in the '70s and he just kind of worked at Ford for 30 years and then came back out and started doing it again. And there's a certain amount of being humble that I think you have to have in order to be able to do that and feel comfortable doing that kind of thing. You have to be able to say, okay, I can walk away and do something different and come back and do my thing and whatever. But those guys that are chasing the dream all the time, they get all wrapped up in cocaine and just their habits are bigger than the amount that they make after a certain amount of time. Those are the guys that their egos really got involved because their ego's so big. Yeah, I could beat Coke. Shit won't beat me. I could beat Coke. Coke beat everybody's ego.
Yeah, I feel like in Detroit, you kind of have like two different types of people in our scene. You have those people that, yeah, they did step away, went and got the job at Ford or at some sort of car plant. And then you have also the people who, might have got like hooked into drugs and went down this downward spiral. But, they were both able to sort of come back and do music again. What do you think about those people and how do you think they were able to step back into doing music again?
Um, well, again, the ego that gets fed is how many people love you, and that people love me. They all love me. They all love me. I love my fans, and they love me. That kind of thing. So knowing that people love you, then that definitely bring you back to wanting to get out there again. You know, that that there's still an audience.
And yeah, we've definitely seen it in our music scene where you've seen people get over their addictions, their demons, even if they're in their 40s and 50s, and now they're, back DJing, getting gigs out of town in different countries. What do you feel like they had to do to sort of, persevere and get over their demons?
I don't know because I haven't been in that situation myself. Whether it's getting over their demons or just, it probably has more to do just with that rediscovery that people have been able to discover you. Because there's some guys and that's what we try to do at Detroit Love is that we try to bring out some cats that never had that global um, phenomena. One of the people, Al Esther, who's one of the best DJs I've ever heard in my life. He's amazing. That just never had that opportunity, and we try to give that opportunity to people that we feel is deserving of the opportunity as well. And but some people are just discovered late. Some people are rediscovered late. That's just the way it is.
I always like to close out all my interviews with the same question. And that question is, who is somebody that's been a part of your life or career that I could realistically interview that would have some great stories or lessons to talk about?
Um, hmm. I always Derrick May is an interesting person to talk to. Always Derrick May. because Derrick and I are brothers. He's known me since I was starting out in the business, and you know, he I think he's learned from me, maybe not as much as I've learned from him, but he has stories from our early days and him putting me on and all that, and there'll be a lot of great things to come from him.
Okay, before we get out of here, where can people go online to get more information about everything you've been doing?
Right. From my website, carlcraig.net, and also Twitter and Instagram, which is carlcraignet. Very easy.
So that was my interview with Carl Craig. It was definitely cool to be able to interview him for this 100th episode celebration of mine. I've interviewed him so many times for other publications, but it was great to finally get him on the podcast. Like always, all the links that he said at the end of the interview will be listed in the show notes for this podcast at freshasthepodcast.com. So let's get on to the Fresh is the Word, Fresh Pick of the Week. This episode's pick is the new album, This Behavior, from the Detroit electro duo Adult. The two members, Nicola Kupris and Adam Lee Miller, craft another chapter in their storied career with songs that mix the dark and the haunting with the lively and dynamic. There's always this interesting dichotomy in the pair's music where there's sort of just like a dance between the darkness and the light within the rhythms of each song. So go pick up the new album, This Behavior, from the Detroit electronic duo Adult. It just came out this past Friday, and if you want to listen to it or purchase it, there is links in the show notes also for this episode at freshasthepodcast.com, or you can just go straight to their Bandcamp page, which is adultmusic.bandcamp.com. So that's another episode of Fresh is the Word in the books. But before you get out of here, I definitely want to remind you on how you can support the podcast. First off, I want to give a shout out to Knox Money, Bang Belushi, and Foulmouth for the theme music for Fresh is the Word. And also, if you want to help share the podcast, you can always go to freshasthepodcast.com and just share any links on the website for any of the episodes on any of your social media. And also, you can go to you can also subscribe to Fresh is the Word on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Mixcloud, Google Play, and TuneIn. Just type in Fresh is the Word, and it should come up, and just hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to leave a rating or a review, especially on Apple Podcasts, it would definitely help out the podcast, and I'll give you a shout out if you do. You can follow me online on Twitter and Instagram at KellyOmegaFresh, and at Facebook at facebook.com/KFresh. And you can follow Fresh is the Word online at Twitter at FITW Podcast, on Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, Facebook at facebook.com/FreshIsThePodcast. All right, that's another episode in the books. Thank you for listening. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.